I'm really excited about this panel because I think you're going to get an awful lot of knowledge and a lot of benefit from my colleagues here. So I hope you enjoy this session. No need for introductions because the information is up on the screen and also in the book. I just want to say I published a book earlier this year, Winning with Data, CRM and Analytics for the Sports Industry. It's been quite well received. I've had some good reviews. But our two rights owners on the stage, Jeffrey and Sam, are going to be giving a copy of this out to the two people who asked the best questions. So hopefully you'll have some ready for them. Okay, so we're going to start with you, please, Sam. We had a conversation to prepare ourselves earlier in the week, and I asked you about how advanced do you think Music Run is when it comes to the use of CRM and data to reduce churn, improve increased growth. And you said you think you're about a C+. Why don't you expand on that, please?
Sure. I think the answer was we were probably a D-, and in the last year we've got to a C+. I think in terms of where we are over the last year, we've done a lot to really start looking at the consumer that we have a relationship with. Those are people who have been through our events, have registered for our events, and what we're now understanding is that they're coming back and doing our events. I think previously we weren't really focused on the existing consumer we had. We were focused on constantly trying to acquire a new consumer. What we've done is we've looked at how do we build a CRM platform, which we now have, which gives us the ability to house all of our participants, to be able to actually understand the history of that participant engaging with our event, and so that we can start to communicate to them in a more personalized and segmented way.
And that's what it fundamentally boils down to, doesn't it? The right message to the right person at the right time to get them to do what you want. So I'm going to switch over to you, please, Jeffrey, another rights owner here. You're a little bit further along than Music Run, aren't you, in your development? So why don't you tell us where you are?
If Sam says that he's a C+ right now, I think I'm pretty much about there.
No, we talked about it. We agreed you're probably a B-.
I think I wish. Right, of course, I mean, given from where we are, as an events rights owner, as well as an event management agency, we always look at how do we convert at the end of the day. We spend so much money on social media, but we look at the conversion and how do we track it? Right? It's something we always ask ourselves, that same question. Back in when Facebook just started, it's almost free, right? In terms of publishing your event and pushing it out to your fan base. Right now, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. And we really got to look at how we spend our money via which sort of platform. And how do we analyze that? Having been on so many platforms, like Facebook, Instagram, like, just take a look at my daughters. They are in their teens. They don't even have a Facebook account, right? And if you were to target a theme run, sort of like Music Run or Illumi Run, you will spend less on Facebook versus you probably will spend more on Instagram because kids goes to Instagram today. And again, goes back to how do you analyze that, how much time they spend, and what sort of conversion, what sort of stickiness that we're looking at right here.
So Sam, you're primarily dealing with email marketing at the moment. Jeffrey, you're doing email marketing and paid social. Can I switch over to Cameron, please? If you tell us a bit about your clients. You don't work in the sports sector. No. You work in non-sports, where traditionally organisations have been more advanced in the use of data. So give us an overview of how sophisticated some of your clients are.
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. So I wear two hats, one as a consumer and a participant of events. I've been competing semi-professionally for the last 20 years. And the other hat I wear, as Fiona said, I'm a solution provider, although we don't work with anyone in your particular space. So it's nice to come from a different perspective. And I think there's been some very interesting comments and content that we've spoken of just this morning. I think we have the danger of overcomplicating what is actually not that complicating. And if you think of your best relationships with your loved ones or friends or family, they're built on a fundamental knowledge of the other person to connect and engage and have a more relevant touch point and communication. And I think a lot of brands fail. They have a content strategy, they have a media strategy. They don't start with, which is probably the unsexiest part of the journey, which is a data strategy. And that's even more and more important at this day and age because of the governance of data protection, data security. What they fail to do, from our perspective, and even as a participant in events, is to identify the customer journey from the consideration phase when I'm thinking about participating in an event. I'm doing a lot of social searches, so where does your brand pop up or where does your event pop up, to the point of me actually landing on your website. And I think that's where it sort of goes horribly wrong in some areas, in that you're not capturing the right data in order to re-engage, or not capturing the right data to reconnect with more targeted, personalized messaging, or to add value back to your sponsors. And I think that can come in many different ways. I now get an email when I competed in a race in Argentina. Although I live in Singapore, I'm not going to necessarily run back and participate in another race in Argentina. But they already know my country of residence, because when I registered, my mobile number says +65. So as an owner of an event, you don't need to ask me where I naturally live or what my nationality is. You already know my country of residence, so you can be smarter and make more informed when you use that data long term.
And that helps increase conversion rates and return on investment. So last of the introduction calls over to you, Mike. So you've got two hats, but you're wearing one of them today. But you are in the tech space with the registration platform, but you also do the same as Cameron and I, and you consult to organisations to help them use data in a more efficient manner. So why don't you tell us a bit about your client range? Do you have any A's? Are they all E's? Are they somewhere in between?
Well, so just to clarify, I consult in the registration and data side, and then I own a timing company as another company. What's that? Is it on it? Okay. Oh, a little closer. Sorry. So with that, yeah, we have clients that are small race management companies up to larger marathons that have collected data for years and years, but have not done anything with it. And as time has changed, it's gotten to the point where now you can go back and you can look at this history of data. So I basically plead with them, give me your data. And then we'll break it down and we look at not all of their, just all the questions they've asked in the registration process. And we got in a conversation earlier is, if you're getting a participant to the registration process now, that's the close. It's now getting through all the filters to get them to that point, because it used to be that we wanted to get them through the registration process as fast as possible to get the sale, right? And to get them registered for the event. Now, through different surveys and all that, we have found out that participants really don't, if they're there and registering for your event, they're going to answer a few questions. You don't have to make them mandatory or not, but you can learn more psychographics or demographic information about that participant. And so we encourage to ask additional questions, because you never know, and then what your sponsors are going to be looking for, or what type of information. So you could gather that whole persona around the participant and really create that profile.
Okay, so you've probably got the message now that all of us on this stage are data geeks, okay? You might also have heard some phrases or terms that you're not used to hearing if you don't already work in the CRM and data space. So at this point, I just want to say, firstly, we'll open the floor up to questions at any time. And secondly, there's no such thing as a dumb question. When I first moved into this space 7 or 8 years ago, I didn't understand. CRM, how? What does it actually mean? So now we're going to try and pull it back and make it a bit more basic and talk about some of the tactics that we use to achieve that engagement, to convert, to take people through the sales funnel, etc. So Sam, I'm going to start with you. What's your number one tactic you use for reducing churn, keeping your participants in your last event and move on to your next event?
I think what we've started to do is we've started to actually look at the history of the participant and create more personalized messages to them. And you can start with some really basic segmentation, such as gender, and curating a message specifically for a male or female. You can then break it down by age. We can then look at the race category that they participated in. I think the second thing that we've started to do is we've actually started to give people something. They want to actually receive some value very early in the the process where you're communicating to them. So, the music run, what we're able to do is curate playlists and actually provide people with free playlists. For us, that's good because they live on our social platforms that we work with, such as Spotify. But we can also actually then create that personalized message. If someone did the 5K fun run with us last year and this year they're stepping up to do a 10K, I can deliver them a playlist that's curated for the 10K run. So that's something that we can start to provide that more personalized segmented engagement.
And when you say a message, you mean by email, don't you?
I'm delivering that message via email, yeah, correct. But we do also work in social. I think one of the things that we do, the paid social strategies as well. And I think the specific thing is really trying to understand who the audience is and learning from the information that we have within our own database. We know who those people are. How do we then marry that up to our other strategies in social, for example, where we don't actually know who those people are? So it's taking that profile that we have within our own CRM platform, matching it to what we're doing on our social advertising and making sure that the two marry.
And that's something Myro referred to this morning when they talked about uploading your list into social. And you talked, Jeffrey, about how much you spend on social. Of course, if you can use your list with social, you can reduce your costs, increase your return. On to you, Jeffrey. So Sam just talked about using demographics for segmentation. You also create customer personas based on how serious they are about their running, don't you? You break them down to serious, casual,
correct,
corporate.
Correct, exactly. And I think that there's a difference between targeting more social type of events, themed sort of fun events versus more technical marathon competition, 10K, half marathon. And the sort of targeting that we're doing is very different, right? Versus, adding on to Sam, what you are doing, pretty much what we are doing as well. But as Infinitus, we produce events for clients as well, right? Such as JP Morgan, Great Eastern Women's Run, Straits Times Run. These are more technical, more competitive events where there's a competitive category like a half marathon. And of course, taking on Sundown Marathon and scaling them throughout Southeast Asia next year. Singapore being the flagship event that we're looking at 30,000 runners.
Wow.
And like I said, going back to the specifics of the demographics, right? We would imagine, or we know that those who runs in the marathons are definitely, the average age is slightly older versus participants that join our Illumi Run pretty much are in their teens. They have a different reach, right? For marathon, we look at how do we engage them to the event day itself, 6 months out, right? And if you look at the registration pattern, right, for someone who wants to sign up for a marathon, like we just launched Sundown Marathon Singapore for next year, June, 1st of June, and we've launched a couple of days ago together with at the Singapore Marathon Race Expo, right? We got instant take up. Why? But when we launched a Illumi Run, which is like a fun run, night run, you launch 6 months before nobody's going to sign up. Why? Firstly, you do not need to train for it, right? And for this sort of team run, seldom people run, or kids run in them. They probably go with friends, have fun, jog, hee-ha-ha, Wi-Fi's, social media, right? But whereas for a marathon, most of the runners are serious about, their performance. They put in the time, which is why the lead time in terms of capturing them at the right moment, and of course engaging them throughout these 6 months, like training runs, which is not new, all of us know that. And beyond that, on social media, how do we engage them? Down to the specifics of, you are a 5 km, you are a 5 minutes pace, to are you an 8 minute pace, are you looking to improve to a 6 minutes pace? Things like that we look at based on past data, right? Sundown Marathon has been around for 12 years, and obviously we are gaining traction, and of course our focus is definitely Southeast Asia for us, Infinitus right now. Yeah.
So do you see any crossover between the participants of one run and another?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
What sort of crossover is there?
I mean, look, all of us grown up, we started Illumi Run in 2013, right? Kids are probably in their 14, 15, and right now they're probably in their 20s, right, some of them. And having experienced this sort of leisure, casual running event, perhaps that will encourage them to take up something more serious together with their friends and start a sprint distance, 3 km up to a 5 km. And eventually when they are pretty much done, or rather in the mid of their career, they want to look at looking after themselves, right? They want to start working out again, start to feel good again, feel great again. Then they will look at, okay, what is the cheapest form and easiest form of exercising. Just put on a pair of running shoes. It doesn't even need to be a running shoe. It could be your school shoe. Head on downstairs to your apartment and run around the neighborhood, right? Which is why today, running is still the largest form of exercise.
So, sorry, Mike, is it? Mike, sorry. Mike, you talked about clients where you'll take 20 years worth of data and you'll do some data mining with that. Are you able to see customer life cycle and what does it look like?
That's the fascinating part about what a CRM will provide is you can actually create a whole customer profile, and especially with a race management group or that has multiple events across the year, you can see the history of what events they're doing year over year. Are they actually training and getting, going up to larger races? Are there families coming? Is it one person signing up the participants? And you can see based on targeting their email addresses and ages and addresses, all that stuff. You can actually create like an actual family and find out, is it are they bringing their grandparents? Are they bringing the whole family? Are they bringing friends? And you can create this whole, map of who the decision maker is. So.
Cameron, among your client roster, have you got a client that does this beautifully, the whole customer life cycle thing? And if so, what does that look like? And how could it apply itself to mass participation events?
Yeah, we have big brands globally that have 10 million size databases, and about a lot of them, in some cases, 80% of their revenue is driven from their database. So you can imagine how much money they save from media spend and social media. It still supports the overall strategy, but because they've got the data strategy right, they save an enormous amount of money. And statistically, your existing customers will spend more and come back more often. We talked about jargon. I'm just going to introduce two terms. So if you've got a pen and paper, I suggest you write these ones down. They're not terribly complex, but they're incredibly vital to someone's marketing mix. One is LTV, which is lifetime value. So the topic of this panel is the gold mine under your feet. So hands up who actually knows the value of one customer on their database. Or have you ever thought about it? If you acquire one or have lost one. So I think start with an end in mind. How much is one customer worth to you? And you could look at, okay, on average, they should participate in 2 events a year. My average event is $100. The lifetime value with you as a brand or a producer of an event might be 3 years. So if you've got a 10,000 database and the average customer is worth $600, that's a substantial worth. So you can take that net worth to a sponsor and use that as leverage. And I think the second term is RFM, so recency, frequency, and spend. So the recency is the gap when Cameron last attended one of your events. The frequency is how many times have I been a participant of your event, and the M is monetary. So I think where a lot of brands, in my personal opinion, fail is go back to that customer journey, the map. Where does it start and where does it end, and where are you involved? And it goes right back down to the basics. They registered a week before the event, send them out a race tip. Then there's during the event, there's information that's captured. There's the post-event. Are you still engaging with them at that point in time, sending them pictures or moments? On the anniversary of the event, retarget them. If you put the registration, let's say 3 months before the actual event, retarget those people during that period as an early bird special. Send them an image, remember this time, remember this moment last year. Get them emotionally more engaged. You have all of the data. You know when they participated, the time that they did at the event. Give them a challenge. This is your time from last year. Let's beat that time this year. Give them a voucher to reconnect and re-engage with that event again. We talked about perpetual contact after the event. Hands up, how many people actually wish your participants a message on their birthday? No one?
I love a birthday email.
I mean,
it's just the easiest thing to do.
It's a fundamental thing. Your friends would be pissed off if you didn't say happy birthday to them. If we can't do that to our own customers, we should, that's a big question mark, and it's the most basic, fundamental thing.
Okay, so Cameron recommended you remember lifetime value and RFM, but you don't need to remember it if you win one of these books, because they're both covered in there, so please feel free to ask questions. Coming back to you, Sam, so Cameron just brought up lifetime value. So you're at about a C+, or you're edging towards a C+. Are you at the point now where you can actually see some demonstrable return on investment? Because if anybody's out there not yet putting a toe in the water of CRM, they might be thinking, well, why would I do it? What am I going to get back? So why don't you tell us about your experience in that area?
So we know that we need to calculate lifetime value, and we've now have a mechanism to be able to do it. Previously, we've never been able to do it. We also look at CAC, the cost of acquisition of the consumer. But I think the bit that we haven't really looked at is what is the return on investment that we're getting from doing this. The one thing that we know for sure is if we don't do it, we're missing a huge opportunity. And ultimately, if we're not talking to our existing customers, then we're probably not going to have a business in a few years' time. So, for us, I think CRM is something that we have to be doing. We want to get better at it. I think the challenge, speaking from a rights holder standpoint, is definitely the events business that we're in is a tough business, and often you don't prioritize your spend on certain things that you don't see as driving core revenues. I think what I can say is that it definitely is going to drive revenue. What we haven't yet worked out is what that exact number is right now.
Okay, so that'll be one of your next phases. So Jeffrey, I'm from Europe, and over there we have some rights owners who are operating at an A already, and then we've got all the other rights owners that are still struggling to figure out what do I do and how do I do it. But when you and I spoke, it was almost like, well, yeah, of course we use CRM, of course we use data. So where would you be if you didn't have that approach, that strategy, or that mindset or philosophy? Could you imagine doing business without that approach?
Given our kind of business is really brick and mortar, right? And when I first attended Chris's first MPA, I said that, internet is the best thing that ever happened to events like us, right? It's the reach. And if without it, without knowledge, without information, without data, you'll be spending silly money, right? Prints were so costly then. Forget about TVCs, right? It's just going to cost you an arm and a leg. Probably going to take your entire profit, But with data comes specific targeting. But I want to touch on what Cameron mentioned, LTV, lifetime value. It's really how you will milk a Jeffrey Fu who is at 15 years old till he's 55. How do you do that, right? From a fun event to a more serious mass participation event. When Jeffrey reaches the age of 35, he's more egotistical, wants to do a triathlon, wants to do an Ironman event, more bragging rights because he can afford it. Then you go into that. And eventually, obviously, you top it off with an ultra marathon. So how you milk Jeffrey Fu from 15 to 55?
When you use the term milk, you actually mean improve the engagement, retain the relationship, yeah?
How you monetize it, basically, right?
Great. No, absolutely right. Sorry, go ahead, please. We have a question here.
I want to be a bit provocative. In sport, whether you're broadcast, media, whether you're sponsorship, with your events, with your talent, there's a tendency to sort of use terminology which doesn't actually translate and transfer well outside of functions. And my best friend's a marketeer, and I always sort of talk to him in terms of acronyms, and that's the joke between the two of us. And he says, yeah, but you guys sell stuff you can't measure. So on the one hand, there's me sort of building digital dreams, on the other hand, there's you guys getting very, very detailed. My question is, how do we actually get out of the echo chamber of speaking to people who understand the terminology as opposed to a much larger audience? Because marketing is no longer a vertical, it's a horizontal which cuts across everything. It's almost like knowing finance back in the day. So my question really is, again, challenge to you guys, what is it that can be done or what you've tried has worked as takeaways for us to go back and speak to my head of commercial, my CEO, my client, my CFO in a way such that it's intelligible yet relevant?
Good question. And my wife still doesn't know what I do after 18 years. She thinks I sell computers. But again, I come back to where we started. The first definition, what is CRM? And I think the misconception is it's a technology I plug in and everything's going to happen overnight and profits will reign. I wish that was the case. But it's not just technology, so I think we just need to get that aside. CRM is a strategy. The technology is the enabler. So it's only as good as the data you put in it to begin with. And I think just break it down to basics. If you think about, again, your own relationships, what makes the best ones work? I mean, honestly, just think about it. It's
holding my counsel and keeping sharp. That's the best relationship of my life.
Yeah. But it's timely, it's relevant, and it's personalized. That's why they work. That's why they're still your friend. And you keep in touch with them. That's why they're still your friend. I think what brands fail to do, they do the event, and then thanks for coming. And then 11 months later, they put their hand up again and say, we want you back again. But what happened in 11 months? Nothing. No birthday, not even we miss you. Hey, remember this moment? There's been zero engagement, and yet we expect them to come running back. They'll run to the next event. They don't have a relationship with you at all. So I think get back to the fundamentals, and I think with your own websites, it really starts with the most basic information. If you've got a mobile field, but you're missing the prefix, separate the mobile field and the prefix into two different areas. That allows you to start with the most fundamentals in retargeting based on country of residence. I'm from Australia, but I live in Singapore. So my proximity to your event is quite important. It's offensive if you send me an invitation, hey, this is coming up this weekend. It just shows that you have no idea about me. So your customers think the same thing. So just go back to the basic things you have on your own websites that enable you to build the most fundamental qualities of any good relationship. So know their birthday, know their name, get their contact number, give them a reason to give it to you.
So we use the expression, as I mentioned earlier, right message, right person, right time. And back to Cameron's example of the birthday email, which everybody loves, and you can turn it into a sponsor message if you're giving 10% off at Hilton hotels, etc., etc. And an example I like to give to help people understand is if you're talking to an audience like this and saying, can I have your date of birth? Some people will do DD, MM, YY, YY. Some will do MM, DD, YY, YY. Well, how am I going to send a birthday email if I don't know which format it is? So that kind of helps break it down and be quite basic for some people.
Can I just add a point to that? With the birthday, you can have tooltips. Tell your customer why you're asking for it. Would love to give you something. Give them a reason, because we just all assume that, I'm going to put in day, month, and most people put the wrong information in. So again, give them a reason why they should be giving you something in return.
And Mitch, I don't believe you're trying to win a book. Sorry, there's a question from a gentleman this side. Thank you.
Well, Jeffrey and Cameron obviously touched on the long-term value of the CRM, but I was just interested to get your opinions on valuing a CRM when you're selling a business, maybe a hiving off a CRM. What are your ideas on how you value a CRM in the sports space?
Do you mean value of the data itself, not the system?
Selling the business.
The data, yeah.
I wish I could answer that question for you right now. What I do know is that Jeff and myself in building properties where we're building a relationship with an audience and that audience is growing over time, we have two things. We have, one, the information on that audience, and depending on who that audience is, that there's a value that's attached to that for other people wanting to talk to that audience. The second thing is that the relationship with that audience is through a property or an experience or a brand which we've created. So I think by being able to have the two together, that there's definitely a value attached to that. How much that would contribute in a valuation of the overall brand or organization, I don't know.
It's what's the asset value of a database? There's a lot of discussion about it. The only frame of reference I can give you is I only know one sports rights owner across my whole 30 years in sport that sells its data, and it's the Dutch Football Federation. And they've got such a deep and rich database. They've been working on it for about 9 years. and they've got it's got so much information in it that they will sell one record for €5. So one record, €5. So think about how many are in your database.
Can I just add on to that real quick? With regulations changing, GDPR, changing the whole new standards, it'll be interesting to see how that whole dynamic or that it changes to what you can give them.
Mike, GDPR.
Yeah, because
okay, so I'm a big GDPR. Anybody want to talk data and the law? I'm here to talk about it. GDPR is not a limiter. It's not a limiter on the way you do business. It just informs you to do it in a more appropriate manner. So the only difference pre-GDPR and post-GDPR, there's no difference to selling data. I've just got to make sure my processes are tighter. So I don't actually feel it has a difference. What about Jeff? You're nodding your head. Do you agree?
I mean, as a layman, I would imagine moving forward, there's a lot to do about data protection. And obviously right now, I don't think it's the best time, but then again, this is something I think we should look at, which is blockchain, right? Which we are already looking at it. Still very at its infancy, but definitely I would imagine blockchain will be a very big part of what we do today.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And to answer your question, 20x maybe?
You hope.
Just to touch on that, because it is a very important topic, because as marketeers and agencies, we can get excited about the sizzle, but the substance comes down to consent, because you can get yourself into some serious hot water. So I think it starts and ends with data and the right strategy, but also the consent and governance and security of that data, because you are guardians of that information, and if it's put in the wrong hands, you can lose your business overnight. And then we've seen businesses literally come and go just from stupid mistakes with regards to not taking it seriously. So it is very, very important. But again, businesses like the ride-sharing companies, the bike share companies here, their model was previously selling the rental of the bikes, but the actual model was on the data they were accumulating. So there's two different types of data. There's the data intelligence, which is the usage, and there's profile data. So there's value in both sides of that ecosystem. But I think that my main point would be just to overcomplicate the uncomplicated. You don't have to spend a huge amount of money on systems and technology. That is not the solution. And don't dive into AI or deep learning. Just go back to the basics, because if you haven't got that right, the rest is irrelevant.
So let's pull it back then. On that point about going back to basics, Mike, what's a piece of advice you'd give to somebody who's not done anything yet? How would they start? What's their first consideration, apart from buy your registration platform?
Well, so the basics are do online registration. So you're collecting data, but really start evaluating that year-over-year data yourself, even if it's in an Excel spreadsheet or whatever, is get in and start to learn your customer. Find out who your top 10 customers are, and create a loyalty program or send them thank you or discount to your next event. Start somewhere. And that's You tell them you missed them. Tell them happy birthday. But just really. I think that's the best place to start.
Cool.
Don't get overwhelmed with the technology of CRM.
Don't make it too difficult.
Right.
Yeah. Start simple.
Start simple.
Sam, on that point, tell us about a big mistake you might have made along your CRM journey. Not necessarily a data breach one, but what would you have done differently if you'd got your last 5 years back?
Quite a few things. I think one of the things that we did is as we grew our brand and we had a license model. And the license model meant that our data collection was very fragmented because it was quite difficult for us to pull all the data back in because it'd been captured through different registration platforms. And so we hadn't necessarily had consistency over the information on a participant that was captured. So we had to do quite a big exercise of pulling in all of the raw data and cleaning it and sorting it to actually put into our CRM, which was a pretty big process, and that has identified gaps in our history. So we missed a big opportunity. If we had our data strategy correct in the first place, we would have more information on the people who have actually been through our event.
So two of you now talking about the importance of a data strategy. But Cameron, how does somebody do a data strategy if they don't know what's important? How do they start? What would be your advice to your first step to creating a data strategy?
We'll start with the customer in mind first and work backwards, and everything should fit in that order. But if you haven't already done it, I think one really interesting journey with post-it notes on a big whiteboard is walk through the customer journey literally from the consideration stage, where you appear, right through to them actually landing on your website, registering, attending the event, post-event. To put a data strategy together, you need to understand the customer journey from end to end, and then what happens after the event. So if you haven't mapped that out, I think it's a great idea, and it's a very simple way to start, is just to walk in the shoes that your customers walk in and identify the gaps, and then basically fill the gaps, and therein lies your communications or your CRM strategy. I think we just wrap acronyms around what is actually fundamentally quite straightforward.
We're going to go through final questions, but before we do, Jeff, I want to come to you one more time. So you just touched on blockchain before we moved on, but let's throw a bit of futurology into here then. The role of blockchain for you, is it about storing the database, transferring the database? What role of blockchain? Is it the ticketing systems? Where do you see blockchain fitting into your use of data?
I think blockchain definitely will going to happen on the, first and foremost, will definitely be on the registration first. Right, that is almost the very first touch point where participants or runners, where they will sign up. And if you were to look at a ticketing system versus a running event registration system, right? You definitely, as a running event, you require more information, right? Personal details, simply because we need to categorize you under which age group, male, female standard, so on and so forth, right? And obviously next of kin information such as those. And also your ID for you to pick up your packet, right? Versus a ticketing system, just put your email, just buy how many tickets you want. That's it. That's the difference. So definitely blockchain will happen on that level. And obviously down the road, in terms of different kinds of engagement, you show up at a race pack, all you need to do is hold up your phone. They'll scan your QR code. Okay, Jeff, S, some XXXX, B is the person, the right person. I think this is going to happen.
Yeah, they're using blockchain already for ticketing systems in Europe at the moment. It doesn't affect the customer experience. It's more about the security of the data. Any questions from the floor before we move on? Okay, so starting at this side, biggest piece of advice you'd give to anybody in the audience, regardless of what stage they're at?
I think it's just starting. If you're not doing it, you should be doing it, and if you are doing it, how are you going to get better at doing it?
So in the words of Nike, just do it.
100%.
What about yourself, Mike? Piece of advice?
I mean, get started with either, if you've had multiple events, really looking at that year-over-year data, and just start evaluating that data, and then additionally, add a couple questions to find out about your participant within the registration process. I mean, to Jeffrey's point is, in the mass participation for the endurance industry, we do get to ask more questions, and we do get to find out more information about that participant, which then in turn makes your data more valuable later, which then in turn brings in the sponsors and brings in the money, and to support your event and so on.
And on that point, you're hosting a workshop tomorrow about the importance of data in sponsorship. Yeah. That'll be a great one. Jeffrey, to you as well, sir, what sort of advice would you give?
My advice is to seek out specialists to help you. I mean, given that, as an event owner, as a race management company, you can't be the best at everything that you do, right? There are specialists out there, Engage Cameron, Engage Mike. These guys are there to help advise you. If you want to seek me out, I can give you a tip or two, but obviously we are not the expert here. We work with partners too, right? And whenever it comes to analyzing the data. But the key question would be, what do we do next, right? To everyone here is, at the end of the day, it's about conversion. If there's no conversion, your money not well spent.
That's right. And that's teed us up nicely for Cameron. So you've spent many years advising on these types of the use of data. What's your number one piece of advice?
Keep it simple. And I think from the conversations I've had with a few of you, is that your businesses live and die with sponsors. At least it sounds that way. So obviously, the better you are at capturing data, and the better you are at leveraging that data for sponsors, the longer you probably will be in business. And find your top 100 customers and start talking to them.
So Mike said 10, you went for 100.
Why not?
Okay, so thank you for listening, everybody. Everyone on the stage here, including myself, we're all very experienced with the use of data. We're going to be around for the rest of the day, possibly even longer. So if you've got any questions whatsoever, tactics, strategy, anything, please feel free to come up and ask us. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, guys.